We're never gonna have a second Keanu Reeves, because it's rare to find someone who's loved by audiences and respected by people in the industry at the same time. And because Keanu isn't the type to hype himself up when he speaks about The Replacements, people suddenly realize the truth about this movie. Turns out, behind what looks like a fun, easy-to-watch sports film, there are some pretty painful details. There's a famous rumor that Keanu flat out denied. There are things he actually had to go through on the field that he only talked about years later. And there are things sitting right there on screen all these years that most viewers never even noticed. In this video, we're gonna go through 10 secrets Keanu revealed about The Replacements, and after that, we'll hear 5 more things the cast themselves shared about Keanu Reeves. Stick around till the end, and you'll see we picked the right person to admire. Number 10. Keanu Reeves shuts down. The biggest rumor about The Replacements. For years, there's been this story tied to The Replacements that I'm sure you've heard before. That after the movie came out, the Baltimore Ravens looked at Keanu Reeves and seriously considered giving him a tryout. It sounds like one of those stories that just fits perfectly with American football culture, fits perfectly with a movie like this, so people kept repeating it. But when asked directly, Keanu shut it down right away. He made it very clear that it was completely ridiculous. There was no situation where the Ravens wanted to try him out. What makes this detail interesting isn't just the rumor itself, it's the way Keanu shut it down. He didn't try to turn himself into some Hollywood-style legend. He just told the truth, short, cold, and clear. To me, that kind of honesty earns way more respect. In Hollywood, there are people who hold on to every story that makes them look cooler. Keanu isn't like that. And that's also why what he reveals next about this movie is way more worth listening to. Because instead of a nice but false story, Keanu starts talking about what he actually had to do to play Shane Falco, from how he trained to how much this movie really wore him down. Number 9. Keanu Reeves kept the brutality of this role. Quiet for years. Some actors finish a role and immediately tell the whole world how much they suffered. Keanu Reeves has never been that kind of person. And maybe that's exactly why when he looks back at The Replacements and shares a few real details about the preparation, people realize just how serious he was. Keanu once said his journey playing quarterback didn't start with The Replacements, it actually goes back to Point Break. But with this movie, everything went way further. He didn't just learn a few throwing motions and step onto the field. He and the cast went through a full football camp that lasted 3 weeks with offense, defense, and even real football players involved, so the whole group could learn how to move lineup, call plays, and live in the rhythm of a real team. What's important is that before this, Keanu had never experienced a real football camp, warm-ups, or locker room like actual players. He basically had to learn that entire environment from scratch. The part that makes me respect him even more is what his body had to go through for Shane Falco. Based on what Keanu later shared, he had to keep 6 ice packs ready in the freezer just to treat his hands, knees, even his feet at the end of each day. There was even a time when a 240-pound lineman stepped on him with cleats. Just hearing that, you know this wasn't a role you walk into and walk out of the same. According to what's been mentioned in articles about the movie, Keanu also gained about 23 pounds to look more like a quarterback. That's the kind of detail he never turns into a badge of honor or uses to complain. He just talks about it calmly, like it was simply part of the job. And that right there is Keanu. He doesn't ask the audience to feel sorry for him. He doesn't need applause for the effort. He just quietly makes the role more believable. And when you see how he was willing to sacrifice other things for this movie, the respect just goes up another level. Number 8. Keanu Reeves took a pay cut to keep a legend. In the movie, there's one detail about The Replacements that says more about who Keanu Reeves is than a lot of fancy interviews ever could. Keanu agreed to take a pay cut so the production could bring in Gene Hackman. That's not an easy decision, This is a star in a strong position, someone who could have held on to every dollar, but instead chose to give some of it up so the movie could have someone he believed was necessary. I think that's something really admirable about Keanu. A lot of stars see a movie as their personal stage. Keanu seems to see it as a machine that has to run in sync. If you want the audience to believe Shane Falco's journey, he needs a coach next to him who actually feels real. At the end of the day, that's the mindset of a mature professional. It's not about standing out the most, it's about making the movie better. And when you look at the chemistry between Keanu and Gene Hackman in the film, that decision becomes even more valuable. They don't step on each other. No one tries to take over the other's spotlight. One brings that calm, sincere Keanu energy. The other brings the weight of a screen legend. That balance is what keeps the movie from drifting into something too light and forgettable. But what I like most is this. Keanu could give up money for the film, but once he stepped onto the field, he still had to learn how to actually become a quarterback. And that's where the story shifts from quiet sacrifice to something much harder, earning acceptance from real football players. Number 7. The moment. Keanu Reeves was no longer seen as just an actor. This is where things really get interesting, not when Keanu Reeves learned how to hold the ball properly, and not when he threw a long pass. It's when he realized a quarterback doesn't live off his arm first. That position runs on rhythm and trust from teammates. Keanu said the most surprising thing during preparation for the replacements was the relationship between the quarterback and the center. And from there, he realized something else too. The timing with the tight end matters just as much. For regular viewers, football might look like long throws, fast runs, and hard hits. But anyone who truly understands the quarterback position knows that being even half a beat late can kill the entire play. Keanu started to see that clearly when he had to practice specific routes, especially crossing routes where everything depends on timing and chemistry with another player. But my favorite part isn't the technique. It's how the people around him changed their attitude. At first, when Keanu missed throws or was off timing, people encouraged him. They knew he was an actor. They knew he was learning. But by the second week, the third week, when he kept messing up the same plays, the whole team went quiet. Then, someone finally explained what was happening. He was out of the grace period. Now they were treating him like a real player. No more going easy on him just because he was a movie star. If he messed up, he had to do it again. It was tough, but it was also the clearest sign that Keanu had crossed the line. He wasn't an outsider on the field anymore. He had been pulled into real football culture. That's what I appreciate about this detail. Keanu didn't just try to look like a quarterback. He went into the hardest part to fake making the people around him stop seeing him as an actor. And once that happened, the price he paid on the field became a lot more real. Number 6. A hit on the field. That actually scared Keanu Reeves. You might feel a chill hearing Keanu talk about this. He said that on set, everyone understood. One simple rule: don't hurt the guy who's keeping everyone employed. In other words, people knew they had to keep the lead actor safe. This wasn't some chaotic set where people just slammed into each other for realism and ignored the consequences. But football is still football. One small mistake and everything changes. And Keanu said there was a moment where that's exactly what happened to him. He said he collided with someone and got a stinger. For outsiders, that term might sound vague, but what makes the story heavier is what comes next. Keanu has a history of a fused neck, and he has a plate in his neck. So his first reaction wasn't just a little pain. His first reaction was real fear. That kind of instinctive human fear, because the worst question immediately popped into his head: is something wrong with my neck? It might be a fun sports movie, but it came with real risks. What stood out to me is how Keanu tells this story without exaggerating it. He doesn't turn it into a dramatic suffering story. He doesn't stretch it out or add details to make people feel bad for him. He just says it simply that it scared him. And honestly, that simple way of telling it makes it hit even harder. Because you can tell this isn't something he's using to impress anyone. It's a real moment, uncomfortable and serious enough that he still remembers it clearly to this day. Number 5. This movie actually comes from a real NFL incident. A lot of people remember The Replacements as a fun, easy-to-watch sports movie with Keanu Reeves, with Gene Hackman, with a group of misfits who somehow get another chance. All of that is true. But there's something many viewers don't notice. This movie didn't come entirely from Hollywood imagination. Its backbone comes from a real event in NFL history, the players' strike in 1987. That was a strange time for American football. Players went on strike, the season got disrupted, and teams had to use replacement players to keep games going. Just that idea alone already sounds like a movie plot. But what makes it memorable is that it wasn't made up. It actually happened. And from that unusual framework, The Replacements built its story. To be fair, Hollywood made it cleaner, more polished, more emotional, and more fun. But the core isn't fiction. That core is real. That's also why this movie has a very unique feeling that I've always liked. It's a bit exaggerated, a bit colorful sometimes, very much like late 1990s and early 2000s sports films, but it's not baseless. The world it builds might seem hard to believe, but the closer you look, the more you see. It's rooted in a very real chapter of the NFL. There was a time when the league had to rely on people seen as temporary, not good enough, not up to standard. And from that group came a very American kind of story about second chances, about self-respect, and about people being underestimated. Maybe once you know this movie came from the 1987 strike, you won't just see it as an easy sports comedy anymore. You start to see it as a cinematic version of a real NFL situation, just told in a warmer, more likable way. And to sell a strange but true premise like that to an audience, this movie needed a very specific kind of face, someone solid, experienced, and believable enough that the moment he steps in, everything feels grounded. Number 4. Keanu Reeves says Gene Hackman. On set was even tougher than a coach. There's a very clear reason why the moment Gene Hackman stepped into The Replacements, the whole movie instantly carried more weight. The way Keanu Reeves tells it, Hackman didn't just play Coach Jimmy McGinty. He brought the presence of a real leader onto the set. Keanu said, Hackman is a gentleman, very kind to him, very generous, and the two of them worked really well together. But right after that, he said something even more memorable. Gene Hackman is the kind of guy who has no time for carelessness. When you show up on set, you better be ready. Know your lines. Know exactly what you're doing in the scene. And if you're not in that rhythm, Hackman spots it immediately. Some actors play a coach by raising their voice, shouting lines, putting on a tough face. Hackman doesn't need any of that. Keanu said he has a very particular look. Just one look, and people immediately know they need to straighten up. Honestly, that's the kind of authority that really hits. Not loud, not flashy, no need to keep reminding everyone who's in charge. Just show up like Gene Hackman, and the whole room tightens up. And if you look back at the movie, you'll see Jimmy McGinty isn't the type of coach who turns every line into a speech. He feels experienced, tough, understands life, understands people, and most importantly, gives off the sense that he's seen enough of the world to have no patience for nonsense anymore. That's exactly what Hackman brings into the film. Not a showy performance, but an anchor. Every time he shows up, the movie feels more grounded. The audience believes he can pull a scattered group together and get them moving in the right direction. I also think working next to someone like that must have been a very real kind of pressure for Keanu. Not the loud kind, but the kind that makes you show up more, put together, more prepared, more serious. Some people don't need to teach you anything. They just walk into the room, and the standard in that room instantly changes. And when a movie has someone like that at the center of its story, the audience starts to believe what they're watching is more than just light entertainment. Number 3. The craziest thing in The Replacements actually happened in real life. By this point, you might go from, "That's pretty interesting," to "Wait, this actually happened." This movie didn't just borrow the idea of a season thrown into chaos by a strike. The craziest part of it also came from real life. The group of replacement players that inspired the film didn't just exist, they actually won. And not just one game. They won all 3 games during the strike period in 1987. That's what makes this story really stand out. If Hollywood had just taken the NFL strike and added an underdog winning streak to make audiences feel good, The Replacements would still just be an easy-to-watch sports movie. But here, even the most cinematic part already happened in real life. The Washington replacement team stepped into that chaotic moment and came out with a 3-win, 0-loss record. They beat the Cardinals, beat the Giants, and even took down the Cowboys in a Monday Night Football game. That's not something added for dramatic effect. That's actual NFL history. And it's not just about those 3 wins, it's about what they meant. That stretch helped keep Washington's season on track, and the team went on to win the championship afterward. In other words, the people seen as temporary solutions ended up becoming a real important part of the whole season. That's the kind of story American movies love to tell, but this time, real life told it first. I've always liked moments like this in older sports films. Hollywood gets criticized for exaggeration, but sometimes the most Hollywood-sounding parts are exactly the ones pulled straight from real life. And once you know that The Replacements feels completely different, it's no longer just a fun movie about second chances. It becomes a cinematic version of a moment when the NFL had to put its faith in people seen as patchwork, and those very people ended up doing something no one expected. And the more you hear Keanu talk about this movie, the more you realize he never saw it as something simple. Number 2. Keanu Reeves explains why the most familiar details in the movie are actually real. A lot of viewers finish this movie thinking it's a very formula-driven sports comedy, a patched-together team, a quarterback with a past failure, an old-school coach, then all the familiar character types you see in American sports films. And that's not wrong. But Keanu looks at it differently. He said the movie does have a lot of familiar sports movie elements, but those details didn't come out of nowhere. They feel familiar because in real life, in sports culture, those kinds of people actually exist. That's a really important point. Keanu doesn't deny there's some Hollywood in it, some exaggeration, some moments pushed further to make it more entertaining. But he also makes it clear that cliches exist for a reason. Because in real football, you really do run into those personalities, those roles, those kinds of clashes. From the slightly odd kicker, the overly aggressive linebacker, to tight ends, offensive linemen, or guys who walk onto the field with huge egos and then have to learn how to become part of a team. The movie might make them a bit more intense, but it didn't invent them. And that's why The Replacements lasts longer than a lot of sports movies from the same time. It doesn't just rely on fun uniforms or a few catchy lines. It's built on something more real, the very familiar feeling of sports culture. People who get overlooked, people who missed their moment, people labeled as finished who suddenly get one more chance to prove they're not done yet. When Keanu talks about the movie that way, he's also talking about Shane Falco. Falco isn't just a character written to fit a formula. He's a very real kind of American sports character, someone who failed, someone remembered for that failure, but still wants one more shot on the field. Keanu doesn't stand outside just to make it sound good. He understands why those details feel so familiar, and that's why he understands why the movie connects with people. And maybe my favorite part is this. After all those layers, Keanu still points out one very specific, very physical detail that's easy to miss, but once you know it, you'll never see The Replacements the same way again. Number 1. The biggest detail in The Replacements that most viewers missed. There are details in movies that sit right in front of your eyes, so obvious that people overlook them. With The Replacements, that detail is the stadium. A lot of viewers watched this movie for years and assumed they were looking at the home field of the fictional Washington Sentinels. But in reality, many of the football scenes were filmed in Baltimore at PSI-NET Stadium, which was the home of the Baltimore Ravens at the time. In the movie, that location was renamed Nextel Stadium to fit the fictional world of the Washington Sentinels. This isn't just a fun piece of trivia. To me, it's the final piece that makes everything click. Because the more you hear Keanu Reeves talk about this movie, the more you realize The Replacements was built from a lot of real elements beneath its fun surface. Keanu talks about the 3-week football camp, about learning timing with the center and tight end, about the stinger that scared him, about how he sees the characters as real types of people in sports culture. And then, with this detail, you realize something else. Even the space the movie stands on is real football ground. So, in the end, it's not just about where it was filmed, it's a reminder that The Replacements used very real things to sell a fictional story, from the people, to the rhythm of football, to the hits on the field, all the way down to the grass under their feet. And maybe that's why the more you hear people who worked with Keanu on this movie talk about him, the more his image only gets better, not smaller. Some actors are loved because of their roles. Some are loved because of who they are. With Keanu Reeves, I think he's both. And honestly, we picked the right person to admire. 5 things the cast said about Keanu. We've just gone through what Keanu Reeves revealed about The Replacements. But this last part is what I like the most. Because after hearing Keanu talk about the movie, what's even more interesting is hearing the people who worked with him talk about him. Number 1. Orlando Jones says Keanu feels like a regular guy. Orlando Jones once said Keanu in real life is a regular guy. I like this detail because it's spot on. A movie star people remember first not for the spotlight, but for how down-to-earth he feels. That's already a huge compliment. It shows Keanu doesn't create distance on set. He comes across as someone very easy to be around. Number 2. Jon Favreau says Keanu truly loves filmmaking. Jon Favreau doesn't just see Keanu as a likable actor. He said Keanu loves acting and also loves the life of being a filmmaker. That matters because it speaks to the core of the craft. Keanu doesn't just show up to do his part. He genuinely enjoys the process of making a movie. And looking at everything he put into The Replacements, that makes perfect sense. Number 3. Gene Hackman said Keanu did a scene around 20 times. There's a story linked to Gene Hackman that Keanu had a scene where he had to jump into water and come back up, and he did it around 20 times. Even though this detail comes from quoted sources, it still says something very clear. Keanu isn't someone who looks for the easy way on set. A tough scene repeated over and over, and he still sees it through. That kind of persistence is something people notice. Number 4. Jon Favreau says he never heard Keanu complain. Jon Favreau said he never once heard Keanu complain. When you put that next to everything we've heard about the football camp, the ice packs, the hits, and the physical pressure, it hits even harder. Keanu doesn't turn hardship into a performance. He just does the work, and other people remember it. Number 5. Stella Cho says Keanu is very kind in real life. And finally, Stella Cho, a cheerleader in the film, said, Keanu is very nice even though they didn't have much direct interaction. That compliment doesn't come from someone extremely close. It comes from someone who just had to be around him to get a clear impression. And honestly, that might be the best way to close this part. Keanu isn't just remembered as a star, but as a genuinely kind person. And truthfully, we picked the right person to admire. So that's everything we've gone through, from what Keanu Reeves revealed about The Replacements to what the people who worked with him had to say about the man behind the movie. And what I like most about this whole journey is how all the pieces fit together. Keanu didn't just make Shane Falco more believable. He made the entire movie feel deeper, more real, and way more memorable than how people usually remember it as a fun early 2000s sports comedy. As for Keanu, I think one thing is clear. Some actors are loved because of a few big roles, but there are others where the more you hear behind-the-scenes stories, the more you hear co-stars talk, the more you appreciate them. Keanu belongs in that second group. He has the seriousness of a true professional, while still holding on to a kind of kindness that Hollywood doesn't always have in abundance. What about you? Which fact surprised you the most? And what was the first movie you remember Keanu Reeves from?